February 6th, 2026. South Australia Police hold a press conference that changes everything in the Gus Lamont case. They declare it a major crime. They say Gus was likely killed, deliberately or accidentally. They say someone at Oak Park Station is involved. Within hours, Shannon Murray and Josie Murray both hire criminal lawyers. But here's what's crucial. They don't hire the same lawyer. Shannon retains Casey Isaacs. Josie retains Andrew I. Two separate, high-profile Adelaide defence attorneys. Why does that matter? Because I think we're watching a deliberate police strategy unfold. And it's not about building evidence. It's about breaking people. Specifically, it's about turning two people against each other and applying unbearable pressure on a third. Now, I want to be very clear up front. Everything I'm about to discuss is theory. It's analysis based on publicly available information and patterns we see in criminal investigations. I don't have inside knowledge. Police haven't confirmed any of this. But when you look at the moves being made, a pattern emerges. And that pattern tells a story. This is behind the crime scene. Let's start with what we know for certain, not theory. On September 27th, 2025, 4-year-old Gus Lamont disappeared from Oak Park Station. His grandmother Shannon called him for dinner at 5:30 p.m. He was gone. A massive search found nothing. For 4 months, this was treated publicly as a missing child case. Then police flipped the script. Major crime. Someone at Oak Park. Someone stopped cooperating. Timeline inconsistencies. Different versions of events. Those are facts. Everything else, we're reading tea leaves. We're looking at behaviour and making educated guesses about what's happening behind closed doors. So here's my theory about what police are actually doing. And it has nothing to do with traditional evidence gathering and everything to do with psychological pressure applied to 3 specific people. Shannon Murray, Josie Murray, Jessica Murray. 2 of them potentially responsible, 1 of them potentially a witness. And all 3 of them, I believe, are exactly where police want them. Let's talk about the separate lawyers first, because this is where the strategy gets really interesting. When 2 people are involved in the same incident and both need legal representation, there are generally 2 approaches. Either they hire the same lawyer and present a unified defence, or they hire separate lawyers and protect individual interests. A shared lawyer means shared strategy, coordinated statements, a united front. It says, we're in this together. Our interests are aligned. We trust each other. Separate lawyers means separate interests. Individual protection, no coordination. It says, I'm protecting myself and I can't trust that you're protecting me. Shannon and Josie went with separate lawyers immediately. Same day as the press conference or within 24 hours. And not just any lawyers, expensive, experienced criminal defense attorneys. Now, this could be innocent. Maybe their regular solicitor recommended they each get specialized representation. Maybe they just want to be thorough. Maybe it means nothing. But here's where theory comes in. What if the separate lawyers aren't a defensive move by Shannon and Josie? What if it's exactly what police wanted to happen? Think about it from a police perspective. You believe 2 people at Oak Park Station are involved in what happened to Gus. Maybe one is more culpable than the other. Maybe both are equally responsible. Maybe one did something and the other helped cover it up. You don't know exactly how responsibility splits, but you know both are involved. Your problem? As long as they're unified, they're strong. As long as they're coordinating, they can keep their stories straight. As long as they trust each other, nobody talks. Your solution? Divide them. How do you divide 2 people who've been married for decades, who run a sheep station together, who've built a life together? You make each of them worry about the other. And separate lawyers are a beautiful tool for that. Because once Shannon has her own lawyer and Josie has her own lawyer, something changes. Those lawyers have a legal and ethical obligation to represent their client's interests. Not the couple's interests, not the family's interests, their client's individual interests. So Shannon's lawyer, Casey Isaacs, is advising Shannon on what's best for Shannon. And Josie's lawyer, Andrew E.I., is advising Josie on what's best for Josie. What happens when those interests diverge? Let's game this out theoretically. Say something happened to Gus on September 27th. An accident, maybe. Something terrible. And say one person was directly involved. Let's call them Person A. The other person, Person B, wasn't there when it happened, but they helped afterward. Covered it up, hid the body, lied to police. Person A is looking at manslaughter or murder charges depending on the circumstances. Person B is looking at accessory after the fact, interfering with a corpse, obstruction of justice. Still serious charges, but potentially lighter. Now both have separate lawyers. Person B's lawyer is thinking, my client wasn't there when the child died. My client made bad decisions afterward, but that's different from causing death. If my client cooperates and tells police what they know, maybe we can work out a deal. Maybe my client testifies against person A in exchange for reduced charges or immunity. Person A's lawyer is thinking the same calculation from the other direction. If person B talks first, my client takes the full weight. But if my client talks first, maybe we can argue diminished responsibility, accident, panic. Maybe we cooperate, and person B becomes the bad guy who covered it up. This is game theory, prisoner's dilemma. Two people who committed a crime together but now face separate consequences depending on who talks first. And the beautiful thing, from a police perspective, is that you don't even need them to actually be in this situation. You just need them to think they might be. You just need to plant the seed of doubt. Once Shannon and Josie have separate lawyers, they can't freely communicate about the case anymore. The lawyers will advise against it. Why? Because anything they say to each other could be used against one or both of them. Better to stay silent, communicate only through lawyers, keep everything legally protected. But that silence breeds suspicion. Shannon doesn't know what Josie is telling her lawyer. Josie doesn't know what Shannon is telling her lawyer. Neither knows if the other is cutting a deal. Neither knows if the other is about to give them up. That uncertainty is corrosive. It destroys trust. And destroyed trust is exactly what police need. Now, again, this is theory. I don't know that this is police strategy. I don't know what Shannon and Josie are thinking. But when I see two people immediately hire separate criminal lawyers after a press conference that clearly points at them, I see division. Intentional or not, those separate lawyers create space between Shannon and Josie that wasn't there before, and in that space, police can work. But here's where the strategy gets even more interesting, because I don't think Shannon and Josie are the real targets. I think the real target is Jessica. Jessica Murray is not a suspect. Police have stated that clearly. Her and Joshua, not suspects. But Jessica was at Oak Park Station on September 27th. She was living there with her parents and her two young sons. She was there. So if something happened to Gus at Oak Park Station and Jessica was there, what are the possibilities? Option 1, Jessica was directly involved. But police say she's not a suspect, so this seems unlikely. Option 2, Jessica wasn't involved, didn't see anything, genuinely doesn't know what happened. Possible, but seems statistically unlikely given she was living in the house. Option 3, Jessica saw something, or heard something, or knows something. But she's not talking because the people involved are her parents. Option 3 is where this gets psychologically brutal. Imagine being Jessica. Your 4-year-old son disappears from your parents' property. You're living there. You're grieving. You're traumatized. And then police declare it a major crime and say someone at the property is responsible. If you know something, or even suspect something, you're now in an impossible position. On one side, your son is dead. You want justice for Gus. You want whoever's responsible to be held accountable. That's maternal instinct. That's grief demanding answers. On the other side, your parents. The people who raised you, who took you in when your relationship ended, who supported you and your children. If they're responsible and you speak up, you're destroying them. You're sending them to prison. You're choosing your dead son over your living parents. That's not a choice anyone should have to make. It's unbearable. And I think police know it's unbearable. I think that's precisely why Jessica is the pressure point. Look at what's happened since February 6th. Jessica has vanished completely. She hasn't been seen publicly. She hasn't made statements. She's gone to ground. Why? Theory. Because she can't face what she knows. She can't face choosing between her son and her parents. So she's retreating into silence and invisibility, trying to make the choice go away by simply not engaging with it. But silence doesn't make it go away. Silence makes it worse. Because every day Jessica stays silent, the pressure builds. Police pressure, public pressure, internal pressure. The weight of knowing something and not saying it. The weight of suspecting something and not confronting it. The weight of wondering if your silence is protecting murderers or covering for an accident or enabling injustice. That weight doesn't get lighter with time, it gets heavier. And here's where Shannon and Josie's separate lawyers come back into play. Because if Shannon and Josie are starting to turn on each other, or even just starting to worry about each other, that changes Jessica's calculation too. If Jessica thinks her parents are unified, protecting each other, presenting a solid front, then her silence might seem like loyalty. Misguided maybe, but understandable. Family protecting family. But if Jessica sees her parents have separate lawyers, if she senses division between Shannon and Josie, if she starts to suspect one might give up the other, then her silence becomes something different. It becomes complicity in watching two people destroy each other. It becomes choosing sides between her own parents. And that might be unbearable in a different way. Unbearable enough to break the silence. Again, pure theory. I don't know what Jessica knows. I don't know what she's thinking. But if I were police, and I believe Jessica witnessed something or knows something but won't talk because of family loyalty, here's what I'd do. I'd create division between the two suspects. Make them distrust each other. Make them hire separate lawyers. Make them start protecting themselves individually instead of protecting each other. And then I'd wait for Jessica to see that division and realize her silence isn't protecting a unified family. It's protecting two people who are already fractured. At that point, family loyalty doesn't make sense anymore. At that point, the truth might seem like the only option left. This would also explain the timing of the February 6th press conference. Why then? Why not October? Why not December? Theory. Police spent October through January getting statements, building the evidence case, analysing timelines. But they also spent that time assessing the family dynamic, watching how Jessica, Shannon, and Josie interacted, understanding the relationships, understanding where the pressure points were. And once they understood the psychology, they made their move. Public declaration, major crime. Suspect at Oak Park. Create pressure. Force the lawyers. Force the division. And then wait for it to work. We're now 2 weeks past that declaration. 2 weeks of Shannon and Josie with separate lawyers. 2 weeks of Jessica in hiding. 2 weeks of pressure building. How long can that last? There's another element to this theory that I think is important. Police haven't found Gus's body. That's public knowledge. Without a body, prosecution is harder. Not impossible. There have been successful no-body prosecutions, but harder. So police need either a body or a confession. Ideally, both. If Shannon and Josie stay unified and silent, police might never get either. But if Shannon and Josie turn on each other, one of them might talk. And if one of them talks, they might reveal where Gus is. Similarly, if Jessica breaks her silence and tells police what she knows or suspects, that information might lead to Gus. Or it might provide the final piece of evidence that makes prosecution possible even without the body. So the strategy isn't just about getting charges filed, it's about getting information that makes those charges stick in court. And the way you get that information isn't through forensics or searches at this point, it's through pressure. Psychological, relentless pressure that makes silence harder than speaking. That's what I think we're watching, not a traditional investigation. Not police gathering evidence and building a case. We're watching psychological warfare. And the battlefield is a fractured family on a remote sheep station. Now, let me be very clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying Shannon and Josie are definitely guilty. I'm not saying Jessica definitely knows something. I'm not saying this theory is correct. What I am saying is that if you look at the publicly visible moves, separate lawyers, Jessica's disappearance, the timing of the press conference, the specific language police used, a pattern emerges. And that pattern looks like deliberate psychological strategy designed to create division and apply pressure. It's possible I'm completely wrong. Maybe the separate lawyers were recommended by a single solicitor who thought it was prudent. Maybe Jessica's silence is pure grief with no knowledge to hide. Maybe police are just building a traditional case and the press conference was standard procedure. But I don't think so. I think this is more calculated than that. And I think we're going to see results fairly soon. Because this kind of pressure can't be sustained indefinitely. Something breaks, someone talks, someone makes a move. The question is, who breaks first? Shannon? Josie? Jessica? My theory. Police are betting on Jessica. They're applying pressure to Shannon and Josie to create division, but the real goal is making Jessica's position untenable, making her silence unbearable, making the truth seem like the only way out. If Jessica talks, everything changes. If she confirms what police suspect, or provides information they don't have, or points them toward evidence or a location, the case could move very quickly from where it is now to charges being filed. That's speculation. That's theory. But it's theory based on watching how this case has developed and understanding how psychological pressure works in criminal investigations. We'll see if I'm right. We'll see who breaks first. We'll see if the division between Shannon and Josie widens or if they close ranks. We'll see if Jessica emerges from silence or stays hidden. But I believe we're watching a very deliberate strategy play out. And that strategy is about people, not evidence, about pressure, not forensics, about breaking silence, not building cases. For Gus's sake, I hope it works. Because somewhere, a 4-year-old boy is waiting for justice. And someone knows where he is. The question is whether they'll tell. And whether police can make the pressure unbearable enough that silence becomes impossible. That's my theory. Time will tell if I'm right. This is Behind the Crime Scene. I'll continue covering this case as it develops. Subscribe for updates. And remember, everything we discuss here is analysis and theory, not confirmed fact. We're all trying to make sense of limited public information.